when you follow your heart, everything expands, everything grows, everything moves. And this is where, I'm the money chick. More money comes when you work at a job that feeds your heart and soul. I'm telling you, I see it so often. And that brings me to the story we were talking about before we got on. Hey, what is going on, everybody? How are you? Boy, oh boy, another episode of Awaken Your Work Life. Why? Because so many of us are so miserable in our jobs, and it is time for that to change. What do you think, Karen?
I think it's time.
I
I think a lot of things, some of us are getting booted into that change. Some of us are feeling it in our hearts. Some of us are maybe having a sense that something should be different. You know, like if you feel like you're in a toxic work environment,
right.
that's one of those moments to explore what could be next for you.
Yeah. And you know what? I got to tell you, it's like crazy town in terms of the people I hear that are just unsettled with their work lives. And we spend way too much of our hours awake working that we really do need to. That's why I wanted us to talk about, we really need to focus on, your heart matters in this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize, we have the amazing educations, we're smart, we go after what we want, but yet we leave our heart on the sidelines when it comes to our work life.
Yeah.
And that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah. It's I don't know, through experience or through training or indoctrination, we seldom believe that it's worthwhile or fair to follow our hearts. Oh, that's fairy tale stuff. Oh, that's folly. Yeah, whatever. That's not real world. That's not real world, and yet we love romantic comedies.
Oh, totally.
Love adventure and the hero's journey and hero's stories. Why? Yeah, we love the hero's journey because it has no heart. That's crap.
Oh, it's all
anybody who loves the Hobbit trilogies, Star Wars, Star Trek, any of these, right. You are actually heart driven. That's all the hero's journey. And it's all about doing the right thing, finding the right way. Like when you cheer for the good guys, that says something.
That's totally true.
And if you think you're living in the world like a big old hard ass, a big old hardcore person, then you know what? Not so much. So don't turn your nose up at people who love rom-coms or love fairy tales, because a lot of our fantasy adventure stuff, if you love Marvel, at the end of the day, they are actually coming from their hearts when they're trying to do good. So I'm just saying.
Well, and here's what I want to point out about that. Marvel is expanding in a major way. So I want to point out to those of you who are watching that when you follow your heart, everything expands, everything grows, everything moves. And this is where, I'm the money chick. More money comes when you work at a job that feeds your heart and soul. I'm telling you, I see it so often. And that brings me to the story we were talking about before we got on. And I have a client, totally chose his heart, literally had the big job in Manhattan versus follow my dream and bring my family to a ranch out west. And totally chose the ranch, took a pay cut because out west doesn't pay the same as Manhattan.
Right.
Finance. But I got to tell you this, over this last year, totally challenged, totally challenged. Loved the work that he did, but you got to remember, you're walking across a bridge, because when you take that first right hook to follow your heart in your job, it's not necessarily exactly where you're going to land, right? Like, I want you guys to know that it's not exactly where you're going to land initially.
It may not be. Yeah.
Because it may just be the place that actually got you to follow your heart in the first place. There is an amazing resource called heartmath.org.
Yeah.
And they realized that they really weren't sure why the magnetic force of the Earth wound up 4.1 times a few years back. And what they realized, and this was on 9/11, and they realized, they looked at other peaks in history. It peaked when Princess Diana died. It peaked when Mother Teresa died. It actually peaked when The Bachelor chose his bride to be. Most world,
like the first show.
Right, the show. I know. Like, I can't even believe that's a globally renowned show. But anyway, when he chose her chick, what HeartMath realized is that it was the human heart, and the magnetic force of the human heart is actually what caused those readings to go through the roof. So they did all this research then afterwards and found out, like, oh, wow, we have measurement tools that the human heart actually can measure up to 8 miles. That we know the magnetic force of our hearts goes 8 miles, and they know it goes farther. They just don't have a measuring tool for it. Guess how far the magnetic force of our brains go?
I don't know. 10 feet.
2 feet. 2 feet is a magnetic force of our heads, our minds. But yet, this is what we have treasured all these years.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have treasured the education, the mind.
Yeah.
Really, what needs to happen, one of my other teachers, Deirdre Morgan, oh my gosh, she's helped me so much. Start with your heart and then add your smarts.
No, that's absolutely right.
And this is where, when she broke me open like 15 years ago, when I started working with her, it was like, oh, yeah, I naturally do that with money, because I always tell people, I'm one of 12 kids. I didn't do anything my heart didn't align with, because you know what? I really didn't have anything growing up. And so it was always like, I didn't understand why people, like, I paid for myself through college. Why would I ever go get a degree I don't want to have? Well, it's to satisfy my parents, or my parents told me I had to, as opposed to, like, we're taught all along to not trust our own intuition, our own gut, our own hearts.
Yeah.
And we now know that the magnetic force of our hearts goes more than 8 miles. So if you really want to attract what you want in your life, you've got to integrate your heart. Your heart is so important. And I know it's an oxymoron when you think about your heart in your workspace, but if you're one of those people that's just like, oh my God, I'm doing the daily grinding, I guarantee you, if your heart is not in your work life, this is when you get laid off. This is when you're downsized. This is when you get sick to actually manifest you getting out of that job that you hate. I have watched this over the 28 years of being a financial planner. I have watched this happen over and over and over again. And the minute you add your heart into the equation, your health starts to get better. You then start to hold healthy boundaries. So you're not putting up with bosses and coworkers that don't feed your heart and soul. You're just doing this dance of going, I matter. And that's self-love and self-care brought into your work life.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's like you have to be willing to believe that your heart can defend you and not just be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of the times we think of our heart as being just a vulnerable space. Right. So if I show you my heart, you're going to break it. You're going to hurt it. You're going to do, but actually the heart is what carries us through. Right. It's the seat of our courage. It's the seat of our bravery. It is what gets us to do the things that, it takes heart or courage to do. I think that the heart gets a bad rap sometimes about how strong it really is and the role that it plays. And honestly, it's the ego that's fragile. It's the ego that gets hurt. It's the ego that feels badly if somebody didn't pick you or you didn't get this. It's not your heart. Your heart's still beating. It's still like holding its own. Like, I don't know. It's really interesting how we can get twisted around and make the kind of, it's not, they're not wrong things, but I'm going to say it that way. The wrong thing, the hero. Like, we make this the hero, but this is based on experience and learning and like what you've been told. What we're also trying to do is move people out of victimhood, like not always feel like you're at a disadvantage or that you've been victimized in your own life, because
Right.
there are definitely things we can do to change and shift that perspective.
Yep.
You know, so yeah, you don't have to do anything, except we want to help make that mind shift. How do you bring your power to work? How do you bring your heart to work? How do you do work that aligns with your soul? How do you do work that lights you up, that helps others? How do you do that? Well, that's what we are here to talk about, because if you are complaining or blaming or running in a circle, and that's a story that you've been telling for a while or you're retelling for a while, it means something needs to change. And if you want to be empowered in your life and not feel like you need to be a bully in order to get there, these are some of the tools. These are some of the tools. This is part of the way that you can get there, discover it, find a way.
Think of it like the art, it's the art behind it, not the science.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's the right brain versus the left brain. You
Yeah.
know, creativity, the innovation, like think of it differently. Think of how it's going to land differently.
Yeah, and we need all of it, and it doesn't have to be complicated. And for those of you that think that it's some big sweeping action, or usually it's little bitty changes with
So
consistency
true.
that actually result in the biggest and most dynamic change. And in that respect, like even a change in mindset, like just you and I have talked about this before. Like there's when we try to convince ourselves over here that we can do it, I can do it, I can do. Okay, this is forced convincing, and
Yep.
this is I'll never do it, I'll never do it, I'll never do it, it'll never work. So what about that space in between? There's a space like a neutral, called the neutral zone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can just get out of either of these extremes
Right.
and into just the neutral zone,
Yep.
that is huge, because it changes the way you see and perceive the things that are happening around you. It makes you more of a receiver as opposed to a deflector. Because if you're at either one of these ends, you're bobbing and weaving and deflecting anything that doesn't seem like it fits.
Yep.
But
Yep.
if you're in the middle and that like, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, but I'm open.
Well, and what we do is what I've come to learn is that then we sit in a state of neutrality. And I've learned that when our nervous system is activated,
Right.
you know, so let's just say you have stress at work and on your way to a meeting, whether it's, you know, Zoom meeting or whatever, you're already stressing about it. Our nervous system then actually gets hijacked. And then you can't be in your heart space. Your heart is not open when your nervous system is hijacked. Like physiologically, just cannot happen. So it's important to recognize that you can't even go to your heart if you're already going into meetings with anxiety or frustration, because that's all hijacking your nervous system.
It is. It is.
Well,
So,
I know time just flies by. I am so grateful. Can everyone do us a favor? We really want to help people get to a more heart-based way of being in your work life. If you could please share this and like it, because then more people can see it online. It's a little thing that can help it go a long way. We'd really, really appreciate that. And we'll be here again next Wednesday. It's Thursday. Thursday. No, it's Wednesday. Next Wednesday, 11 a.m. Central. And we are here to help you along that journey. And if you want any help whatsoever, please send us a message. We will answer your questions. put them on there because we want to make sure that we're talking about what your needs are so we can get you to that next place. All right, anything else for everyone?
No, just be in your hearts.
Yeah.
Have a fabulous week and be safe.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.